So there was something that I wanted to that I was looking at that I haven't necessarily been doing, but wanted potentially anyone who's a listener that wanted to dig into some info on this to go run with it. Message us on the show. Maybe we can work something out. But similar mindset to that on like which teams are good in certain scenarios. If you go into NHL overtime, okay, it's very, very, very likely that assuming there's no power play on each side or anything like that going into the OT, that the teams are roughly priced 50-50 to win the OT. You might have a shade like -20, -30, but it won't go higher than that. And that's just for a 5-minute overtime and a shootout. This is seemingly not correctly priced because there's certain teams that have to be better in overtime just based on the players that they have and then the goaltending that they have. And then there's also certain goalies and players that are just way better in shootouts than the rest. They're all small sample size stuff. It doesn't really make sense to just like back test and be like, okay, this is the best shootout player because this is his attempts. But there are teams that are better in shootout than other teams. There are certainly goalies.
There's goalies that are far worse in shootouts than other goalies.
Correct.
Who was it for the Devils years ago? Was it Blackwood or someone? I can't remember who it was. They were just not going to make saves in shootout. They're just horrible on breakaways. So there's that stuff. But, Dinky, rest in peace to him. But he always used to tweet like his overtime and shootout record when betting on hockey. And for years, it was deplorable. Right? And I kept telling him, I'm like, there's got to be something that you're not capturing when you're betting the game in the first place. Because maybe there's like an added percentage you have to add for this team in case the game goes to overtime or goes to shootout. And at that time, when he first started doing it, I was having the complete opposite results of him. He was hitting 35, 40% of his games that went to overtime and shootout. But he was like his average price on those games was like plus 100, should be coin flips. And I was having the opposite effect. I was winning all these overtime and shootout games. Then I got into the opposite as years went on, which you're not used to. You're like, fuck, I went from being, plus 20 units on overtime games in a year to now being minus. What's happened? I got to tell you, I've spent so much time trying to figure out overtime and shootout in the NHL with almost no success. I don't know what it is. I completely agree with your theory of, you put Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl out for an overtime, that should be worth a lot more than, I don't know, I can't even give you an example, but like two players that are not that good.
Like it's not even about who was favored in the game at that point. It doesn't even matter. You almost throw that out, and it's like a new game in OT. Like if this was just an overtime game and shootout,
yes,
knowing that the goalie is locked in, and the players are locked in, but how can we do that? Like you realize basically there's only how many players play in OT? 7?
On average, it might even be less than that.
6?
Yeah, I actually that's an interesting question, but you know what the most important part of OT is?
Possession.
Well,
but forget about even the overtime. Let's say you go into shootout. Yeah. Every time you go into shootout, the odds are -10 aside on live. Bullshit. That can't be -10.
I agree with you there.
Somebody figure this out and let's dust these bookies.
The edges are not that big, but I've done a lot of work on that, and I agree with you there. It's not 50-50 for every shooter.
How could it possibly be 50-50 when there's literally some goalies who are just not good in the shootout?
Dude, there's games where you have a backup goalie going up against one of the best goalies in the league. I don't care who the shooters are on the team. Like that's more than 55%.
But we also got to just like chart out and be like, okay, who's the best goalie right now in the league for power rankings?
It depends. Like
Rangers.
Yeah. Like honestly, I think like Thatcher Demko's the best goal save above expected right now. He's not the best goalie in the league.
So name who's the best goalie in the league. Is it Shesterkin? Is he the best for shootouts, for breakaways? The likelihood on that is probably not. He's probably not. There's probably a goalie who's mid-tier.
But here's the problem.
That's really good at shootout.
But it fluctuates so much year to year. Like you don't see consistency for goal. This is the goaltending is. If anyone can figure out goaltending in hockey, you will be a multimillionaire, because that's where on a year-to-year basis you see massive drop-offs. It's like what happened to this guy, Ilya Sorokin. He's been great for a couple years, and then all of a sudden, like, can't save a puck. and things happen. It's the randomness of goaltending. It could be mental. It could be a player's dealing with like small injury and you don't know. Pekka Rinne went from being like the best goalie in the league to the worst. So he had a hip injury that was kept, shoveled under the rug for a couple seasons. But these are the exact questions you should be asking when you're betting on sports, right? Obviously, if you have a hypothesis and you look at the prices of overtime and shootout games, you're like, they're lined like it's a coin flip. This obviously can't be right. Okay, now you set out to prove that it's not, right? And then once you do that, you just bet it into oblivion, basically.
Yeah, there's got to be something there. Reach out to the show.
Yeah. If you find out, you can DM me on the side, and we can keep it on the down low.